Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. We're continuing our summer Zera Shimshon remote shear. This week is Parashat Beit Hanan, also known as Shabbat Nachamu. We're going to continue with learning the Zera Shimshon on the Parsha. This week, we're going to do two short pieces. One about the importance and time and place for mitzvot, and then one towards the end of this week's Parsha, which will be cover veloti taveh, the idea of the difference between having coveting something and also desiring something. So we're going to start with Drush Yud Yud Gimel. It's a very short piece, but I think it's very meaningful. So we're going to start with Drush Yud Gimel and Parshat Beit Hanan. It says Avodah Zarah Parakama. The Parsha it says Ayom Lasotam. In this week's Parsha, it's talking about that we have to perform mitzvot. The Gemara tells us that in the first parak of Avodah Zarah, it says that you have to keep the mitzvot and the commandments that we made to do them today to perform the mitzvot. That's in this week's parsha, saying that the world, only this world, right? Hayom lasotam. The Gemara, however, in Avodah Zarah says that the world that we live in, the Olam Hazeh, is compared to the days of the week, and the Olam Haba is compared to Shabbat. So here, the Zera Shimshon is going to actually use that comparison, that mashal between this week, the days of the week being Olam Hazeh as compared to Olam Hazeh, or Olam Hazeh compared to the days of the week, as preparation for Olam Haba, which is Shabbat. And it says here, Hayom Lasotam, today, meaning that we have to do only in this world today, is the time and place to perform the mitzvot. Not tomorrow. We won't have the opportunity to perform mitzvot once we get to Olam Haba, right? So it says, according to this, and based on an idea that's really used al pi Kabbalah, but it's also used on Shabbos, on a mitzvot of Shabbat, the Lamatet Melachot. We have one of the Lamatet Melachot is borer, to sift, to filter. And also, al pi Kabbalah is we have the idea of filtering, meaning that we have to find the sparks, the kedusha, that exists within every item that we do and every action that we do and everything that we see and interact with. So based on that, and how do we filter and how do we sift through the things through Torah, mitzvot, and all those and positive commandments, all those mitzvot, that helps us be able to filter and see the right direction. So here through that, the Zera Shimshon continues and says, Atam al zehu, the reason for the limitation of mitzvot performance in this world is kikar kiyum ha-mitzvot hu levarer hatov me'ara. The reason why we're limited to performing mitzvot only in this world is because the whole point of this world is to separate or to filter through the good from the bad, right? The halam haba nikrat Shabbat, and the next world is considered called Shabbat. Borer b'Shabbat chayav chata. The person who's borer, who's filtering, who's sifting on Shabbat, is considered is liable and is required to bring her korban chatat, and therefore he's not allowed to be doing it on Shabbat itself. Therefore, you have to prepare before Shabbat so that way that you don't have to be performing the mitzvah, the avera or the malacha of sifting of borer on Shabbat. Right? Although in this world, right, which is during the week, because as we said, the days of the week are a preparation for Shabbat. So then this week, as we prepare for this for Shabbat, it's a mitzvah to sift through things and select things that are better and more important and valuable for Shabbat. Right? The only way to really the best way to how do we filter and how do we sift? The only way to sift through is the primary method is through using some sort of device like a sieve, like a filter, like a cone, like a strainer, something like that. So he says that he's making a comparison between the Torah, which is the kli. The kli for us is the best way for us to prepare for Shabbat, which is the world to come, the Olam Haba. The best way for us to prepare that is to use the kli that we received, which is the Torah, to be able to filter and be able to see and be able to identify what is the good and the bad. And using the Torah, the mitzvot, the chachamim, and being able to use them as our guide and be able to see what is meant and how do we prepare for Olam Haba, which is Shabbat. Shaita kli emunato shel Kadosh Baruch Hu b'briat olam. Right? What was the device or what was the tool that Hashem gave us in the Olam that was created at the day of creation at the Briat Olam? the Torah. The Torah was the tool that Hashem used to create the world and was given to us as a way to understand and be able to filter out and identify what's good and what's bad. So now that we know what the tool is, which is the kli, and we know that the malacha of berur is given, a borer is given and used only with a kli, right? Where when the malacha, the isur is with a kli, whether it's a filter or a sieve or whatever it may be. Using that as our guide, once we understand that to prepare for Shabbat, in order to prepare for Shabbat, we use the kli, the Torah, as our guide for preparing in this world to do the berur now, so that way in the world to come, which is compared to Shabbat, we are prepared in the right way and using the mitzvot in the best possible way, preparing ourselves for Olam Haba. That is Torah number 13. It's a short one, like I said, but it's a really powerful one, teaching us the importance of value of Torah, mitzvot, and listening to Chachamim as a way, or a guide to understand what's good and bad. Sometimes we get confused what's good or bad because we don't always understand. But using the Torah as our guide and halacha as our guide, it will help us those tools are there to help us understand what's best and how we perform best now, so that we're prepared for Olam Haba, which is compared to Shabbat. And then we go to the last drush of this week's parsha, which is drush Tet Zayin, number 16. So it says here, pasuk velo titaveh. A person, we know that there's an isur in one of the Aseret Dibrot. It says in this week's parsha, it says the Aseret Dibrot are given in the aliyah of Chamishi, the fifth aliyah, and it says that we have an isur to covet and also to desire. So the question is, why does it mention both? So the Zera Shimshon is going to mention in a second. So the pasuk says, the Zera Shimshon, Drush number 16, it says, pasuk velo titaveh. The pasuk says velo titaveh, you shouldn't desire. Rashi, based on English, says lo terog, you should not desire, from the root of tafresh reish gimel. Afu lashon chemda is also a term of chemda, it's a term of desire, meaning that titaveh and lachmod are similar. Rashi says that they're similar words. As the pasuk in Reshit talking about the Chet Adam HaRishon, it says that the pre of the Eitz Hadat Tovara was considered nechmad l'mareh. Nechmad l'mareh there, Unclus there also says which Unclus there translates as it was desirable to see, meaning that fruit of the Eitz Hadat was desirable to see. So Ad Kan L'Shana. So Rashi here uses the pasuk in Reshit to show that both cases, nechmad, the word lo titaveh, and in both cases are both meaning a similar word, meaning they mean to desire. Kashe, fresh right? The question is, if we're using both, if we in the pasuk in this week's parsha it mentions lo tachmod velo titaveh. If we're meaning that if they mean the same thing, then why use both, right? So the halacha, the Gemara, the Rambam says in Hilchot Gizela, it says lo tachmod hu achar gemara maseh, lo titaveh hu tchilat hatava. The Rambam says that lo tachmod is after the deed is done, meaning when a person pressures his friend to sell or he convinces him to take that which that person desires or covets. And lo titaveh is when you begin to have it, beginning to have that desire because I'm jealous of what the other person has. Right? If we understand that they're both, there's one is before and one is after the act, so therefore why did Rashi tell us that it means the same thing, right? In other words, it teaches us that the tava is the same as chemda. We understand that they're different, meaning according to the Rambam, there are different actions. One is before, one is after the act. But Rashi seems to imply that they're the same. So the question is, how do we understand the difference between the two? The old right? So he says, let's put aside the first question, which is, I don't understand why, according to Rambam, we have one is before the act and one is after the act, right? Tachmod and titaveh. And then it means, but Rashi implies that it's the same. And then if we don't, even if so, we have a better stronger question is, if they mean the same thing, then why does a pasuk use two different words? It could have just said lo tachmod as a generic term. To answer these questions, we have to explain that tava is not necessarily synonymous or not necessarily mean the same as chemda, right? There's some sort of separation, division, kind of differentiation between the two. Tava refers to the initial stage, like we said, and refers to the initial stage of chemda, which is just the desire of the heart. So he says, the Rashi diek, right? We have to say that Rashi notes that afal pi shebedorot dibrot harishonot lo ketiv lo titaveh. Right? If we go back to the first set of Dibrot, which is in Sefer Shmot, right? We don't see the word titaveh at all, right? Mikoma is not written. It doesn't mention that at all. Mikoma kom tchilat chemda hi hatava. So he says that according to the beginning of chemda is hatava, right? In other words, chemda is used as a general lo tachmod in the first set, and here means it's a generic term of coveting of some sort of both in the heart and in the deed, in both in action and in your mind. Right? Is just as the pasuk which Rashi mentions in this week's parsha. He mentions v'nechmad hu l'mareh. Nechmad l'mareh means that it's desirable just to look at, right? So it's desirable to see. Shesham v'day pshita v'day she'eno lashon chemda mamash. Right? Obviously, it was just looking at it. It didn't mean that he actually coveted. It mean that he did something about it, but rather it's used as it's the same idea, meaning both. It means both covet in the heart and in the deed. So in this case, we see that chemda is a generic term that includes both action and deed, and both in the heart and in the deed itself. Right? When Chava saw that these fruits were beautiful, she hadn't done anything yet; she just saw them. Right? So that's the beginning of the action. Chemda is there to say it's beautiful, it's enticing, but she hadn't taken action yet. Right? Kamosha Romez. Lashon chemda b'shar pamim, k'moshe katav Rambam, right? As the term chemda usually means, like the Rambam says, in context, chemda means desire in the heart alone without any deed. Mishum hachi shapir teguma unkos mirage, v'fi shehu lashon ta'ava hatluya b'lev. Kodem gemara haseh. Now we understand why Rashi and Unklos translate the word chemda as desirable. Nechmad is desirable because it refers to the desire of the heart alone, right? So chemda is something that we have in that first stage, before the deed is done. So it's more of a term that chemda is a generic term that defines either before the action, and then ta'ava, right? V'lo titaveh is after the action. So now we have understanding. That means that what we say is that ta'ava here is the initial stage of the chemda, which is desire. Chemda is the desire of the heart, and ta'ava is that initial stage. Chemda is the heart, right? As chemda is translated in Bereshit. Accordingly, we see that in the first set where the Torah mentions the idea of lo tachmod, right? It doesn't have the lo titaveh, and instead repeats the term lo tachmod, one used in terms of general, and the other time to prohibit the whole idea of having the taking action. But the other is meant to limit it to prohibit coveting in the heart alone, even without a deed. So what we see here is that in some cases lo tachmod means to covet as a general term, and in this case it's talking about lo tachmod v'lo titaveh. It separates the two to help us understand that lo tachmod means and lo titaveh have two separate actions. One is in the heart, right? Lo tachmod, it's the heart, but if you haven't taken action yet, lo titaveh is don't take action. So how do we protect ourselves? The question is, having desire to be jealous of someone is very hard to control your heart and say, oh, they have a nice car, or they have a nice house, or they're going on vacation. How do we control that? So we have to look at it from the perspective of, as the Chavot HaLevavot says, is that we have to take that which Hashem gives us. We have to be appreciative for what we need at this moment. And when Hashem gives the other person, we have to say thankful for them. That's what they need at this moment, and we have to appreciate that which we have and that which they have, and not rather instead of saying is, oh, I want what they have, I'd rather say is, thank you, Hashem, for giving me what I need at this moment. In addition, another way to look at it is that the ta'ava, once you have it in your heart, it takes over, consumes you, and therefore it's going to lead to the lachmod. It's going to lead to that whole idea of coveting and doing action. So in order for us to do that, to control our action, preventing us from taking action, we have to fill our hearts with Hashem, saying, thank you, Hashem, for giving us the ability and the tools and the resources and the physical things that we need right now to do what the action, to be serving you at the best possible way. And thank you, Hashem, for giving them what they need. And rather than looking at us as, oh, I always want what they have, and that will cause me to always be trying to find a way to get what they have will not necessarily make me happier because I'm always chasing something else, but rather looking at it saying, Hashem, thank you so much for allowing me to and recognizing that which I have and be blessed with what I have, and therefore allowing us to not necessarily make room in our heart for jealousy and coveting and desiring, but rather looking at it saying, Hashem, give me the ability to look at and fill my heart with appreciation and value. Shabbat Shalom.